part of the opening Allemande from the Fourth Sonata for solo violin by Eugène Ysaÿe. It was played by Hilary Hahn on that DG recording, Gramophone's 2024 Instrumental Award winner, as well as the Recording of the Year. And a new Recording of the Year has just been named as part of the 2025 Gramophone Classical Music Awards. I'm James Jolly, and welcome to this special Gramophone podcast in which we look at the 2025 award winners. And I'm joined by Gramophone's publisher and editor, Martin Cullingford, Tim Parry, Gramophone's deputy editor and also editor of International Piano, and Hattie Butterworth, editor of Choir and Organ, as well as Opera Now. Well, let's start, as it were, at the beginning. And we're going back a really long time for the early award winner. We're back to the early 1400s. This is the Krinski Codex from Ram Klang, soloists with the Ensemble Dragma, the Ensemble Peregrina, directed by Agnieszka Budzinska-Bennett. Martin, how did this go down at the gathering?
I think it was admired, enjoyed, and I think also, like a lot of early music, there's often a wonderful detective story as the foundation under it. In this case, the Krinski Codex was a major score from 15th century Poland that actually only survives because it was looted by the Nazis during the Second World War and therefore avoided being destroyed when Warsaw suffered so terribly. It's now been performed, explored, revived by this extraordinary group who really capture it. It's completely mixture of sort of chant-based early music, but actually just some wonderful exploratory melodic music too. It's a really resonant recording, actually. I think
it's a very different sound that you usually encounter for early music. I mean, it's got almost sort of nasal quality, which is actually really powerful. It really kind of hits you hard.
It makes it feel properly historic, but I don't mean as in looking back as a museum piece, but actually you kind of feel you're being taken into another era that actually is hugely enjoyable.
We'll stay with the voice, and this is voice and ensemble, which is, as the name would imply, this is for a singer or singers with either a number of instruments or a full orchestra. And this year it's a singer with a full orchestra. This is Contemplation from the baritone Hugh Montagu-Rendel with the Opéra Orchestre Renombre de Rouen, directed by Ben Glassberg. And this is on Erato. This is Hugh Montagu-Rendel's debut album, and it's a wonderful orchestral vocal collection, operatic arias, and then it has Mahler's Lieder, Eines fahrenden Gesellen, and one of the Rückert Lieder, amid a selection of arias in English, in French, in German and Italian. And it really does show off the range of this extraordinary young singer. Hattie, do you want to dive in?
Yeah, I mean, I remember speaking with Hugh about this recording, and a big part of our conversation was about the psychology of these roles, because he's a singer who he says he gets incredibly involved in every role he takes on, whereby he actually ends up sort of having dreams as if he's the character. And he says actually you can find it quite a scary experience to enter the character of like Hamlet or those kind of psychological spaces. But he's also someone that's very happy being vulnerable and going to a darker colour, a darker place. And I think you can hear that in his voice, that it's something that is so expansive and colourful and interesting. He talked a lot in our interview about his friendship with Ben Glassberg, the conductor. And I think you can really hear that sense of trust and friendship. And it is a deep friendship, and they've gone through a lot together, and they're both very young, but they've both seen a lot of each other's lives. Out of that has come this beautiful, soulful album.
And I mean, Hugh has the most spectacular pedigree of every singer, because he's the son of Diana Montagu and the late David Rendel, wonderful tenor, his mother mezzo. Father, he was his teacher. And I think you can really see what a classy act he is. There's some wonderful juxtapositions on this album. I love the fact that you go from the Carousel Soliloquy by Richard Rodgers straight into the Mahler Ich bin der Welt abhanden gekommen, and actually it works incredibly well. And he sings this number from a musical with all the passion, intensity and range and colour that he does, say, Billy Budd's aria, or Korngold's fantastic Mein Sehnen, mein Venen from Die Tote Stadt, which is probably the most beautiful number on the whole album, I think.
I was thinking that as well. It just pours out of him, doesn't matter what the sensibility or genre is. There's just a real sense of, wow, this is a voice that can just fit and fill a space. And it's so satisfying to listen to.
And it's really quite a inventive and bold first album for an artist. There are easy options one could have taken, but actually, because he does bring these psychological depths, he demonstrates his communicativeness.
It's also a showcase for his versatility for a first album to demonstrate such a range of stuff he can do. It's fantastic.
Now, from a voice with orchestra, we'll go to voice with piano, or with guitar, or with cello. This is the song winner. This is Songs for Peter Pears, Robin Tritchler, the tenor, and he's joined by the pianist Malcolm Martineau, the guitarist Sean Shibe, and the cellist Philip Hyam. It's a Signum release. Music written for and premiered by Peter Pears, and I suspect Malcolm Martineau is standing in for people like Benjamin Britten, Sean Shibe, Julian Bream. All British composers, so we've got Richard Rodney Bennett, Barclay, Britten, Bush and Oldham. A really wonderfully put together programme, but it really shows off Robin Tritchler's, I think, very different approach to these songs than Peter Pears, because Peter Pears was so associated, there was that incredible colour in his voice, which, was a bit of a sort of Marmite thing. You either liked it or you didn't. And Tritchler is actually, it's a much more beautiful voice than Peter Pears, but done with a comparable intelligence. Did you enjoy this?
I really did enjoy this. I was especially taken with the songs of Michelangelo, and those kind of incredible harmonies in the piano, and I felt like the voice and piano were just so incredibly interwoven.
It's a really difficult cycle.
Yeah.
For singer and listener, in a way. It's quite a challenging piece.
It's high at the start, especially, and you often kind of wait for this tenor to, struggle to go up there. But actually, it was a very effortless experience to listen to.
And the Lennox Berkeley cycle, the Fife Houseman songs. This is the one with guitar. These are really beautiful pieces. I'd never heard these before.
They are. They're really beautiful. But Sean Shibe, no one listening to this podcast will be surprised to hear me say what an extraordinary guitarist he is, but he brings a poetry that works perfectly, I think, with Robin Tritchler's voice. Peter Pears, as you rightly say, had an incredibly distinctive voice, but also the people that you name-checked earlier, people like Julian Bream, who recorded with him, these works were written with these people in mind. Those works feel very part of a particularly special era of English music. And yet here we have artists sort of taking it and placing it in a modern age, taking this music and giving it a new life for a new era, in a way that doesn't feel like they're sort of referencing that past. They're actually making these pieces feel fresh and new today, and I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah, because we are sort of probably two or three generations now on from Peter Pears. I can remember the first generation after Pears. I did hear Pears singing Death in Venice when I was really quite young, and you kind of got the feeling that the first generation had this, how do we get away from Peter Pears? And actually now I think there's so much time between Pears recording and performing these things, and now it's a sort of new thing. So you get, it's actually rediscovering the music rather than the sort of style, I suppose.
Yeah, Tritchler's able to make the music completely his own. He doesn't have that worry, yeah.
And he contributes a really wonderful note. He's really kind of, he's the real driving force behind this project.
Tra l'ingenio non
Choral Award this year went to J.S. Bach's Mass in B minor, probably one of the greatest pieces of music ever written by anybody. And this, again, sees Raphael Pichon and his group Pygmalion for Harmonia Mundi returning to the Gramophone Awards. I mean, this is a really sensational performance of, one of these sort of towering masterpieces of Western art.
Absolutely. And it's quite interesting the way you position it as one of the greatest things ever written. Of course, people do talk about it like that. They present it as a sort of monument and Everest. And yet actually in this recording, you don't feel that someone's having to step up to that moment. You actually feel that he's looking into the work and bringing out its beauty, its drama, its poignancy, its faith, its spirituality. Pichon has recorded Bach so extraordinarily. The Passions have been a part of what he's done. And actually something of the sense of the drama of those narratives lives here, I think, in the communication of these words and these texts. In the discussion we had about the recordings when we were choosing the recording of the year, it really was cited as actually perhaps a benchmark for now this repertoire, certainly right up there among the very best recordings of the B minor Mass that have ever been recorded. He's a wonderful, wonderful conductor, and he's also the kind of person that has assembled around him some superb musicians that he clearly just has a wonderful shared sense of rapport with.
Yeah, and we should mention the soloists who really, really wonderful. Julie Rosé and Beth Taylor, sopranos. Lucille Richardot is the mezzo. Emiliano Gonzalez Toro, tenor. And Christian Imler, who's popped up on many Bach recordings in the past as the bass baritone soloist. And they really do kind of give this performance something really very special. They're beautifully blended with Pygmalion.
The soloists are absolutely first rate, and it's very easy, perhaps glib to say it's the soloists that make this recording, but they are the sort of golden thread that runs through this record. The thing I loved about it was also this real care for text. You feel the whole work unfolds. It's not something. There are sort of real showcase moments you can dip into. The Cum Sancte Spiritu is thrilling as it needs to be, but you need to hear the whole thing to really have a sense of the sort of the overwhelming effect that it has. There was one of our writers had a lovely expression when he said, "You need to set aside an afternoon for this recording," and it feels like that's exactly what it is. It's not just the 2 hours it takes to listen to it, but probably the 2 hours you need afterwards. Yeah, no, it's absolutely wonderful record.
And you're right about those moments, like something like the Sanctus, which has a big sense of blazing glory, and it's perhaps possible for that to feel like the big sense of blazing glory. But here it is that, but actually it feels almost more powerful because it's emerged from the
absolutely, and the credo where there's so much text that often it's treated like, well, we've got to get through this text. Sometimes you feel like the composers treat it that way too, but I mean obviously not here. But there is so much text, but you do feel that all that text really means something to these musicians. Yeah.
Opera next, and this is a real sort of one-off. This is Wagner's Flying Dutchman, Der Fliegende Holländer, and it's an opera set constructed around, I guess, the centre, Lisa Davidson, but it also gives an opportunity for us to hear Gerald Finley's wonderful performance of The Dutchman. Great cast: Brindy Sherritt as Darlens, Stanislas de Barberac as Eric, Anna Kisjudit as Mary, and Erik Grötvedt as the steersman. And this is the first recording to come from Edward Gardner in his new role as the head of Norwegian Opera. He's crossed Norway from Bergen to the capital and is clearly making waves there, as it were. And this is a wonderful set. This is probably the only opportunity we'll have to hear Lisa Davidson sing Zenta, because it's not the sort of role many sopranos want to do on stage. And I think she more or less said, the 4 performances she did here, the concert performances that made this recording, that was it. And that's absolutely fine. But we've got this wonderful and extremely treasurable souvenir of those. Did you enjoy it?
I really, really did enjoy it. I mean, what an amazing cast, first of all, but then also to have Ed Gardner's sort of steering, which is so exciting and electric. And the chorus are on fire. Everyone is just going for it. And it's, I mean, for Lisa, like, as you say, she's very clearly said, this is the only time I'll probably ever do this. She's going on to do Isolde from January, her role debut in Barcelona and then at the Met. So, and in between this recording and that, she's had 2 twins as well. So yeah, it just feels like a really beautiful moment, and what an incredible recording.
And it's a sort of authentic performance, isn't it?
It is. Is it in Norway where the Flying Dutchman is set? I'm sure that gives it an extra resonance for people there and for us as listeners. It's actually an example of recording playing a very important role in someone's career. She knew she wanted to sing this role, knew it wasn't going to become part of her performance repertoire, but wanted to take this moment to put it down on record. Obviously, it would have been amazing to have been there in the hall to have heard it, but otherwise, that was it. And yet here it is, preserved. And people are already talking about her as one of the great sopranos of our age. And when people look back, to have had her singing this role, I think, is wonderful. Gerald Finley, of course, also brings something really quite special to the role that he sings. It's quite a sort of nuanced presentation of the journey, the psychological journey that his character goes through. He's someone whose voice we're very familiar with, but who's also just an actually superb character actor as well. And that comes across brilliant on this recording. You can see him on the stage.
He's a singer, isn't he? I mean,
yeah.
he sort of, he really gets inside the words and the motives of. I mean, it's a really complex opera when you sort of dig around in it, and I think he really brings everything out, every drop of juice from this particular.
One of the things that makes him a great leader singer as well, of course, is absolutely. Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say. His career-long immersion in leader as well as fascinating characters in the opera scene, I think have given a dimension to this.
Now we're going to stay with opera because our contemporary award winner this year is Sir George Benjamin's Picture a Day Like This. Now this is his 4th collaboration with his librettist Martin Crimp, and it's the 2nd time one of his operas has won a Gramophone Award. In 2014, Written on Skin took an award. This year we're back. It's a slightly more compressed or more compact opera than Written on Skin. Basically, in a nutshell, the story is about a woman whose infant son has died, and she's given the chance to bring him back. Find one happy person in this world and cut one button from their sleeve. Do it before night, and your child will live. And it's amazing cast. Marianne Kribasa as the woman, Anna Prohaska, Beata Mordal, Cameron Shabazi, John Brancy, and the Mahler Chamber Orchestra conducted by the composer. This is on Nimbus. What did you think of this?
This is such an impressive recording. I didn't realise that it was a live performance made during that first run at X, because you can't tell. I don't think it feels. I mean, the recorded sound is fantastic. And the singing is sort of mostly close to the pattern of normal speech, which I absolutely love about his operas. I was a massive Written on Skin fan. This is much shorter. It's only about sort of 65, 70 minutes, which I remember when it happened, everyone was like, oh, it's lovely to have such a short little outing to the opera and then go and have a drink afterwards. But he really packs in some incredible orchestration, and like a lot of his style is very kind of, there's a lot of freedom and there's a lot of instrumental colour, and I just think this is his writing at some of its absolute best.
And the 2 central women characters, Marianne Kribasa and Anna Prohaska, are just sensational. I mean, I'm a huge Anna Prohaska fan at the time, so she's kind of. But Kribasa was quite a surprise to me because I only really heard her singing French repertoire.
No, she is absolutely brilliant in that role, and it's it's not easy. What a fantastic recording to have been made, and also on Nimbus, which is lovely. Lovely for Nimbus to have such a fantastic achievement.
I mean, they've been such loyal collaborators with Benjamin, really, and I think that's been a wonderful partnership. An example, actually, of a label and an artist-composer really contributing something important to our understanding of contemporary music.
And I think we need to point out what a good conductor George Benjamin is. We often forget, but actually, I think he's won a couple of Gramophone Awards as a conductor down the years. But this is him in both roles, and he really does draw some amazing player from. I mean, the Mahler Chamberorchestra is a fabulous group anyway, but he really does get them playing their socks off. Fantastic. Now, last year's instrumental award winner was the Eugène Ysaÿe solo violin sonatas, and that's maybe one of the sort of great solo violin works of the 20th century. We'll go back 1 century, and probably the standout solo violin work there was the Paganini 24 Caprices, and that has clinched the instrumental award winner. This is Maria Dueñas, 22 years old. This is another DG recording. And she's also our Young Artist of the Year, so we can discuss 2 awards in one. This really is amazing playing. I mean, it's particularly amazing when you think how young she is.
She takes these works, which were written presumably as technique practice, and she turns them into really vivid, powerful pieces of music. The virtuosity is all there, but so is characterization, imagination, and actually just this extraordinary sound. She is very young. I don't want to say that sort of cliche of old head on young shoulders, because in a brilliant way, it feels like a young person playing, but she does it so incredibly, extraordinarily well. The second album, or the second disc, I suppose, to use such terms, that accompanies this is where she's taken the idea of the caprice or the capriccio and explored it through other composers, old and new, which actually sets, I think, the Paganini pieces in an interesting context, but also just enables us to hear her in a different variety of music, and actually in collaboration with other artists as well, because it's not obviously all solo. Yeah, I think when we were sitting down to decide who could win Young Artist of the Year, I think we all agreed quite quickly that she absolutely was the person who should receive it.
I mean, she just makes it so, and it sounds an odd thing to say, but makes it sound so musical. It's rather like, when you hear a performance of the Chopin or the Debussy etudes, and you think, yes, of course, they are technical studies, but actually this is just the most incredible piece of music per se.
I think, absolutely. I think the caprices are as close as we have to an understanding of how Paganini could actually play the violin, which they were kind of groundbreaking for their time. And there were other things he wrote, which I think he was a kind of performer who tended to play things that were more extreme than what he would write down. And the caprices were, I think, the only thing that came close to what he would actually do in performance. So have been, forever a sort of a real sort of challenge, a benchmark for what a violinist can do. But as Martin says, that what stands out here is the sheer character of the playing. It's so musical. They don't sound like technical challenges or exercises at all. They're just pieces of music that happen to be very difficult. There's the second disc, I suppose we're calling it, but the second half of the album, in a way, it's based on the idea of the caprice, but it almost could be a freestanding album. And obviously, it's being the instrumental category. It's the solo element of it that has won the award. But I think we were all agreed that second half of the album, if you like, is equally stunning, but in a different way. Yeah,
I sort of couldn't believe. I mean, sometimes I didn't recognise the caprice at the start because she had done something with it that I'd never heard before. I think if you've heard enough of these in, study classes and things, you sort of know what you're about to hear. But actually, I was like, oh, it's number 5. Like, I didn't realise, because it's so different. Actually, number 5 was one that absolutely blew me away. Like, I don't think I've ever heard a violinist control their bow in that way, with this sort of spiccato sound she gets. And it's so fast and so cool and so exciting. I think she's just a really sensational player.
I think she also manages to play with a real sense of personality that never feels idiosyncratic or narcissistic. And that's a really fine balance to tread for any musician. And yeah, that's one of the things that stands out for me.
And one thing I just wanted to add, obviously she is our Young Artist of the Year. And it's a reminder actually that so many of the award winners this year, some we've talked about, some we're going to talk about, are young artists. They've emerged through a rigorous voting process, which has involved people of all generations, and yet they stand out. And I think that's a very exciting and inspiring thing to ponder as we look ahead to what the years might hold.
Well, from one violinist to another, and somebody who's had a Gramophone Award before, and this is Villefranc, and she has recorded the Elgar Violin Concerto with the Deutsches Symphonieorchester Berlin, conducted by Robin Ticciati. This is a Warner Classics release. This is actually the fourth time the Elgar Concerto has won an award in the almost 50 years of the Gramophone Awards. Obviously, there was the very famous Nigel Kennedy recording, and then there was the James Ennis recording, which actually came out top in a recent Gramophone collection on the work, Thomas Sayetmeyer, and now Villefranc. I heard her do this, actually the first time she ever performed the work, which was with the CBSO and Mirga Gražinytė-Tyla. Here she does it with an English conductor, German orchestra. A beautiful performance, really beautiful performance.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I have to say, the Ennis recording has been my go-to for many, many years. But hearing this, I sort of almost thought I might change my answer, because I mean, this is known as I'd say probably the hardest violin concerto, because it is just so insane how he expects you to sort of do these hugely difficult double stops at the top and then massive, virtuosic things up and down. It's just like so hard. And she plays it not quite like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but she certainly does not play it with any sense of effort, which is so freeing, because Elgar is effort. Sometimes it's quite effortful to listen to, but she makes it very exciting and free and fun to listen to.
If you think of so much music of the Nordic region from where she is from, it has some of that same sort of cool, reflective poignancy, that emotion that's controlled and all the more moving for it. And I think she brings it out rather beautifully.
Now, the Orchestral Award winner this year is slightly unusual repertoire, actually, and it's very nice to have it performed so beautifully. This is the Kurt Weill album from Deutsche Grammophon, the Berlin Concerthaus Orchester, conducted by Johanna Malwitz, and it has the two symphonies, and in the middle, the Todessünden, the Seven Deadly Sins, with Katharina Merling. The first symphony, 1921, the second, 34, and Todessünden just before that, 1933. And they do sound very different, the first and second symphonies. The second symphony and the Todessünden, very much the sort of Kurt Weill sound that we are familiar with. I always struggle with number one. I find it kind of dense work. But actually, if there's one performance that kind of shines light into the corners, it's this one from Malwitz.
I confess I didn't really know number one before this. I knew number two. But maybe I'd listened to it once before. There's a Naxos recording, which I think is how I first heard these pieces. But this album is a whole different ballpark. We'd identified Johanna Malwitz some time ago as a one to watch before she signed to DG, and this is of course her DG debut. And as Peter Quantrill said in his review in the awards issue, the definite article is absolutely warranted. This is the Kurt Weill album. I don't think you need another version of the symphonies if you've got this one.
And actually, the Seven Deadly Sins in the middle is a really nice kind of sort of filling to a rather luxurious sandwich. And Katharina Merling is I think fabulous. She sings it a lot more than a lot of other people who tackle the work. actually really beautifully and very characterfully. And there's that kind of sardonic quality of that Malwitz brings out in this music that is really intoxicating. So her next album is a rather jump from here. It's going to be Haydn's The Creation. She probably couldn't get much further than that from Kurt Weill, but moving forward.
Shows the diversity of
Absolutely.
what she's doing.
And proper competition there in that work. And probably, I mean, she's made the benchmark of the Kurt Weill, but it'd be interesting to hear the Haydn.
Rare examples of Christian Zimmermann on record. I mean, he hasn't. We think of him being a prolific recording artist for DG, but actually, in many cases, decades go by. This is piano quartets, numbers 2 and 3 by Brahms. Christian Zimmermann, joined by Maria Novak, violin, Katarzyna Budnik, viola, and Yuya Okamoto, cello. It's funny, when I saw this record come out, I was thinking of another DG recording, not a million miles away, that won an award a very long time ago. And this is the Brahms Piano Quintet with Maurizio Pollini, with the Quartetto Italiano making a sort of guest appearance on DG. And it was always a recording that struck me. It was sort of slightly unbalanced because Pollini was such a dominant voice on that recording, whereas this album is absolutely perfect in so many ways. But as chamber music playing, this is perfection because it is Christian Zimmermann absolutely as an equal to these 3 other players. I know that the sleeve would lead you to think otherwise, but actually this is really sensational. I've played it so many times.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, there's no getting around the fact that Zimmermann is the star name. That's all, and that always feels a risk, doesn't it? Either when you throw a chamber record together with 4, in this case, sort of star soloists, or in this case, we've really got 1 star name and 3 very accomplished collaborative musicians. We've got 2 of them are. They've been principals in Polish orchestras for many years, and Yuya Okamoto is the cellist of the Eben Quartet, so wonderful chamber musician. But so it turns out, so is Zimmermann, and there's a real sense of sort of conversational give and take, which is just wonderful, and they draw you in and don't let you go. I mean the music is wonderful. But that second quartet, I mean, goodness, that's a big piece, and that goes on and on. It's easy for a listener to lose their way if the performer is not really guiding you, and these performers absolutely do. It's a fantastic record.
In all the best possible senses, it's rather gloriously old school record. Very cool repertoire, 4 brilliant musicians that just sit down, record it so superbly. Even the album sleeve looks like it could be something on vinyl from a while back, and I think it's just a reminder that actually doing something exactly like this, just saying this repertoire deserves to be performed by today's generations of musicians in such a splendid way. And haven't DG done well? This is that record so far in our conversation.
Now, Brahms makes an appearance on our piano winner, the first sonata, which completes the trio of sonata recordings by Alexandre Kantorov. This is on bis. Here he couples it with Schubert's Wanderer Fantasy, and then a little handful of Schubert's songs in Liszt's transcriptions. A beautifully chosen sextet of songs, and it actually makes a really great program. One could almost make an argument here that this is a concept album as well, because Kantorov obviously spent a lot of time thinking how it should go together, and there are all sorts of internal relationships on this album. But I think we should talk about the Brahms Sonata, which is one of the great kind of entries into sort of a genre from a young composer. I mean, he was very, very young when he wrote his 3 piano sonatas, and they're absolutely torrential works. They're huge, and Kantorov really gets on top of them.
Absolutely. I mean, these 3 Brahms sonatas, Kantorov now recorded them all. I mean, the first sonata, although it begins almost like a nod to the Hammerklavier, it's actually the second of the 3 sonatas that Brahms wrote. It's a bit like Beethoven Piano Concertos, number 2 came first. It's very hard to avoid it sounding sort of muscular and very blocky writing. This is Brahms in sort of youthful athleticism mode, quite unlike the late Brahms piano pieces everybody loves, which are sort of very reflective and autumnal. This is not like that at all. And Kantorov not only brings that athleticism to it, but a great sort of pliability in his phrasing. He's a pianist who plays with enormous freedom. He really lives in the moment, and I think that's something which the risk that isn't going to work on record. This might possibly be one reason why he seems quite reticent about setting things down on record. I mean, I think this record has sat in the can for some time. He cares about the end product, but he's also, I think, very aware that it can really vary from performance to performance. But for me, the highlight is actually probably the Schubert Wanderer Fantasy, which I think is a stunning performance. And those Schubert songs in the middle and Liszt transcriptions, these are things which, I mean, I've heard Kantorov play these live, and he brings such line and colour and flexibility to them. They're super. That opening of Der Wanderer is a sort of foreboding and is really beautifully done.
Tim, as always, speaks so extraordinarily beautiful about pianists. I'm just so grateful that we have figures like this here in our musical world making records like this.
Now, our concept album this year goes to another piano record. This is George Fu. It's called The Colouring Book, and it comes from Platoon. And at its core, it has both books of etudes, and around it a number of other etudes. So we have Matthew O'Coin's 3 etudes. We have Ninfea Crockwell-Reed's 3 etudes for piano and flower pots, James Larter playing the flower pots. And it also has George Fu's own Passacaglia on a theme by Radiohead.
I really enjoyed this. I love the description Tim uses of the music with flower pots as sounding like the piano is in the middle of a mini gamelan orchestra. But I think the colour of the sounds, really, that lead leads to the title just makes this a really splendid listen. Probably just worth thinking about what we're looking for in a concept album. We introduced this award a few years ago, really as streaming became the prominent way that many people listen to recordings. And we said, actually, there is something very special about an album that's been thought through as a programme that is more than the sum of its parts, that you listen to from the beginning to the end, and everything in it is enhanced by everything else. And I think this is a wonderful example of that. Obviously, Platoon is a very streaming-based label, but I hope, therefore, in this world, it will encourage people listening in that way to think this, too, is something that I can press play on. And by the time I get to the end, I will have been taken on a journey. I very much enjoyed his Passacaglia on a theme of Radiohead, and again the etudes for piano flower pots, but ultimately also the Debussy etudes, which I think are works that will be the most familiar to listeners to this. But George Fu very much brings his own imaginative colour to it.
I mean, Tim, with the Debussy etudes, I mean, he's up against some absolutely formidable competition. I mean, does he hold his own?
I think he does. As you say, there are some great versions of the Debussy etudes we've all grown up with. And one thinks of Mitsuko Ushida, but more recent versions from Babazet and Stephen Osborne, which the bar is set high. But he does hold his own. This record would not be the record it is without very fine Debussy, clearly. But ultimately, it's a celebration of the etude as a genre that is still relevant to composers writing now, with the contemporary sets of etudes we have on the record. But it's also a celebration of pianistic colour. That's where it really works. And the flower pots clearly add a lovely touch of colour. But the programme with each set of Debussy etudes, there are 2 books of 6. We get one at the start and one at the end, and then the other works in the middle. And it does kind of compel you to keep listening all the way through. Yeah, it's a super record.
Now, every year we acknowledge the work of a label And this year we have gone to Bruzzane, who have given us some quite a few winners down the years. I mean, Martin, why did Bruzzane come to the top of the pile this year?
This is an absolutely wonderful organisation. Their starting point for everything is wanting to be advocates for things that haven't been heard, and their particular area of focus is the, sort of, as they call it, the long 19th century of French Romantic music. So it begins with scholarship and looking at scores, preparing scores, actually then publishing scores, and then just assembling the most extraordinarily talented group of musicians to make these works really come alive. And just thinking back over the last year or so, there was a wonderful celebration of Bizet to mark his anniversary year, but centred on his penultimate opera, Jamelet, although also then bringing music that he wrote for the Prix de Rome in there too. We've had Lalo's Le Roi d'Is. There was also a Carmen, obviously a very familiar work, but actually that was staged, again, with Bruzzane's planning and resources, in an authentic manner that they feel is how Carmen would have been put on the stage originally, and that's been filmed and shown. They also then put such attention to detail in everything that is released. The booklets, which are absolutely beautiful, crafted products made by a printmaker in Venice, beautifully cloth bound. Everything feels like a collector's item, and that, I think, pervades everything that they do, including if anyone is lucky enough to go to Venice and lucky enough to see the Palazzetto Bruzzane itself, which is a beautifully restored Venetian house with an extraordinary recital space in the middle of it, but also then the offices where all this work is done.
It's interesting. Last year we gave the award to Opera Rara, and actually they're quite similar in a way in their sort of philosophy and their sort of aesthetic ambitions, in that, you know, they also are driven by scholarship, and they also produce these wonderfully packaged, very comprehensive editions. But at the centre of it, it's just wonderful music making.
Yeah.
I think Bruzzane share that very much with Opera Rara.
No, they do. There's similarities. And whereas every recording is, of course, a great contribution to the catalogue, the work of people like Bruzzane, it's an extraordinary contribution to our art form.
Obviously, we're celebrating Bruzzane as a label, but we shouldn't forget also they have supported a huge number of pioneering projects on other labels, but where the financial support bluntly comes from Bruzzane, and they've done a huge service for French Romanticism.
Oui, je le sens, je l'atteste, le salut nous est promis, c'est à nos seuls ennemis que ce jour sera funeste, sans en garder le souci, nous pouvons compter leur nombre, pour les rejeter dans l'ombre, le Seigneur les conteste.
Now, our Artist of the Year. Now, this is a little bit of history in the Gramophone Awards, and this is the first time we've ever returned to an artist to make them Artist of the Year. Now, if I say that this artist over the last sort of probably slightly more than 12 months has released albums that include Beethoven's Symphonies 3 and 5 from Verbier, Kurt Weill's Seven Deadly Sins, Mahler 7, Haydn the Creation, the Beethoven Violin Concerto, Janacek's Jenůfa, Mozart's Idomeneo, and just around the corner, Dvořák's Slavonic Dances. I think that gives some idea of the range of our Artists of the Year. This is, of course, Sir Simon Rattle, absolutely flying high. I mean, he really can do very little wrong. He's arrived in obviously a very happy place in Bavaria, an amazing relationship with the Bavarian Radio Symphony Orchestra. And we've got the sort of tail end of his relationship with the LSO here, the Kurt Weill, and obviously the series of Janacek operas that he's been recording annually with the London Symphony Orchestra. I mean, there are some great records here.
You rightly say it's the second time he's won it, but he obviously won it at an earlier stage in his career when he was doing some extraordinary and pioneering things then. But actually, when we were looking through the last year or so of releases, it couldn't not be given to Simon Rattle, recording after recording. When we sit down and think about our editor's choices and recordings of the month, we think, can we really make another Rattle recording, have that accolade again? And ultimately, we do, because every one of them is superb. You've talked about the diversity of repertoire, and all of it's done with this completely convincing sense of understanding of the music. There's a lovely phrase that Peter Quantrill has used in the piece in the awards issue, where he says, you could imagine them done differently, but not better. And I think we talk about, what's a definitive recording and so on. But actually what we're really saying here is everything is done so brilliantly.
I think what the interesting thing is actually, if you look through the list that I just talked through, he's actually returning to a lot of music. I mean, we've already got recordings of the Beethoven symphonies. We've already got a recording of the Kurtweil Seven Deadly Sins, ditto Mahler 7, ditto Haydn The Creation. And I remember a million years ago hearing him conduct the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment in Mozart's Idomeneo. So he's going back to music and just digging so much deeper. I mean, the Mahler 7 that came out this year is, one of the most chattering experiences. I mean, it's a sensational recording. And even just the recent Idomeneo, I think I listened to it the other day, literally from end to end, and I just thought it was quite sensationally good.
It is an editor's choice, in fact, in the awards edition. But no, absolutely, you have a real sense of him sharing with us his own growing, developing understanding of this music. And you mentioned Mahler symphonies. The point of a Mahler symphony is it shouldn't sound the same conducted by a young conductor as an older conductor, in the same way that as listeners it shouldn't feel the same to us, like a novel that you reread or a piece of art that you look at on a regular basis. It should speak to you differently as you go through your life. And of course we're talking about him as being older than he was, but by conducting terms he's still quite young, still an awful lot to go, and that is a hugely exciting thing.
Now, our Lifetime Achievement winner this year is somebody who's actually worked with our Artist of the Year, Simon Rattle, on many occasions. He's one of the great British singers of our time, Sir Thomas Allen. Now, why did he find favour?
He's just such a wonderful character singer. When you think of the roles that he's performed, when you think of the songs that he's sung, including one of his more recent albums, the American Songbook, you're very aware. You immediately know it's him, because despite the fact he's singing beautifully and perfectly, there's just a wonderful characterization in his voice that's so distinct, and that's not just the sound of the voice, but actually just the way that he tells us something through it. Looking back over a long career, a long and admired career on record and on stage, he's someone that people have always just talked very fondly of working with. And actually now he spends a lot of time working with students and helping develop the next generation. He was Chancellor of Durham University, and I remember talking to him a little bit about the work he was doing there, and that wonderful sense of just joy at what life is offering just seems to come through in everything that he does. Obviously, not every operatic character that a figure like him sings will be a nice or a savoury character, but he always seems to have found some humanity in them.
I mean, he was an incredibly charismatic actor on stage, and I think he was one of those rare singers who can actually take that from the stage into the studio. Because, I mean, for example, his Mozart Don Giovanni just absolutely crackles and sizzles on disc. I mean, it won a Gramophone Award, back in the 80s. But he's done so much since. I mean, his Beckmesser is just one of the great creations of a few decades ago. But yeah, a wonderful singer, and actually very versatile. I mean, as you say, a wonderful singer, on a small scale in lieder and song, and then right through to big Wagner, Mozart, and other Verdi roles. I think a truly wonderful Lifetime Achievement winner this year. Now, the one award that we make every year is chosen by our readers and visitors to our website. And this is Orchestra of the Year. We choose a shortlist of orchestras and we let our readers vote. An orchestra with a very long pedigree on record has been chosen as our Orchestra of the Year. This is the Bergen Philharmonic, Norway featuring large this year. For many years it was in the care of Edward Gardner. Now it's currently without a conductor, but the search is clearly on. And some wonderful things have come out this year. Tail end of Ed Gardner's reign there, a wonderful recording of Brahms's German Requiem came out early this year. So what do you think propelled the Bergen Philharmonic to this win?
What's rather wonderful about this award is the fact that it is voted on by audiences, and the audiences who elevate the orchestra to the top of the shortlist are people who just feel a relationship and an affection for it. It's clearly an orchestra that feels very rooted in its city. When you talk to people who know of it or aware of it, there's clearly a sort of an affection for the musical presence that it gives people. I also wonder if just not by being in a capital city with all of that sort of, chaos and transits that can go on, it's enabled it to create a very distinctive voice. And when it does take on projects, be it the Delius, the Massive Life, or the Brahms Deutsche Requiem that you've talked about, it's able to really focus on them and bring something quite special out. Edward Gardner, I think, did some superb things there. They continue their relationship with Sir Mark Elgar, and we look forward to finding out who's going to take over.
It's interesting that actually a Norwegian orchestra has been championed by two, to them, foreign labels. Many recordings came out on BIS, Swedish label, and more recently a huge number from Shandol's British label. So it's a real kind of multinational thing going on here. But as I said, early on, a real long relationship with the recording studio. It's one of those orchestras that can go into the studio, and it makes a lot of actually studio recordings as opposed to live recordings, which today is quite rare. But they can absolutely sort of raise their game and get that level of intensity that you get in a studio that you would normally get live. And they understand what making records is.
They made many records for Hyperion too, and one thing they've clearly had is a succession of very fine conductors, which is
we haven't mentioned Andrew Lytton.
Exactly. Yeah.
One wonders whether certainly the more recent conductors' experience of opera is something that gives a particular sound and dimension. And I think actually the recent recording of Salome is a perfect example of that. Here's an orchestra that understands the theatricality and drama of the theatre.
A few years ago, they won Recording of the Year for Peter Grimes, recorded very much in Bergen. We talked about the Flying Dutchman and Norway. Well, in a way, Bergen is a perfect place to record Peter Grimes because it's a fishing port looking the other way, as it were, but the same kind of, the terrain and excitement and that very sort of special character you get as a seaside.
The isolation and the sometimes harsh weather. Having grown up on the East Coast, I think there's probably a shared sense of looking outwards to the sea and the horizon and how that feels.
Now, every year, one of the recordings that we've discussed is named Recording of the Year. Now, Martin, you obviously chaired the committee that gathers to decide which of the recordings gets the prize of prizes. Talk us how this year's Recording of the Year was reached.
Well, we had a wonderful discussion, as always, of 8 hours in which we explored, discussed, people spoke very strongly about the recordings that they wanted to champion. And yet, actually, this year's Recording of the Year just emerged from the discussion and ultimately the voting as a really quite standout winner. I think people, when thinking to themselves, what should a Recording of the Year be? And it's not just what is a great recording, but actually, will this stand up in years to come looking back as an incredibly important contribution to the catalogue of that work? And this one very much did so. And to reveal it, for those who haven't already seen it on our social media channels, on our website, it is Raphael Pichon and Pygmalion's recording of Bach's B minor Mass. We spoke earlier about what an extraordinary recording it is. And if that didn't urge you to go and have a listen to it, then hopefully the fact that it's won this accolade very convincingly.
Music from Gramophone's 2025 Recording of the Year, J.S. Bach's B minor Mass, performed by Pygmalion, conducted by Raphael Pichon, a Harmonia Mundi recording, and full details of all the winners can be found on Gramophone's website, gramophone.co.uk. Gramophone podcasts are free, so if you enjoy them, then a really great way to support our work is to take out a subscription to Gramophone magazine. Over 13 issues a year, we bring you hundreds of reviews by our expert critics, as well as in-depth articles about the latest classical music releases and the most exciting musicians of the day. And if you head over to gramophone.co.uk/subscribe and enter the code podcast20 in the checkout, you can even get a 20% discount off any subscription package. We really value your support. And consider leaving a review or rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. And do look out for another Gramophone podcast very soon.